like this. And this is known as the playa. So it's an ancient lake bed that's completely dry and empty. And every year, on the last weekend of August, 70,000 people assemble from around the world to engage in a really interesting social practice that's unique to American culture. This gathering takes place in a temporary community called Black Rock City. And it's surprisingly well organized. So it has its own zip code, it has its own postal service, it has street addresses that are organized according to alphabetical order. And Burning Man is very different from an arts festival or even a music festival. Life at Burning Man is defined by 10 principles, so which include things like radical inclusion, immediacy, participation, and civic responsibility. And one common practice at this event is the practice of gifting, whereby people give gifts or services with no expectation of reciprocation. And this practice is so common that we hypothesize that people who attend Burning Man will be more likely to form a habitual association between giving and the warm glow associated with the act of giving itself. And so we expect that the more people participate in gifting behavior, the more they will experience an increase in action value. Another form of transformation that takes place at Burning Man is a more profound epistemic transformation, in which the boundaries between the self and other become blurred. People often report a strong increase in interconnectedness and compassion at Burning Man, and we expect these attitudinal changes to correspond to increased prosociality as well. So the more of an epistemic transformation people report, the more prosocially we expect them to behave as well. So we have these two kind of important factors that might influence people's prosocial behavior. So on the basis of these predictions, we launched a series of field experiments to investigate how prosocial transformation at Burning Man influences prosocial valuation and behavior. And the research consists of two parts. In part one, which we conducted this past year, we wanted to verify that Burning Man was indeed a site of prosocial transformation. And in part two, which we will conduct this summer and fall, we hope to investigate the mechanisms by which this occurs. So part one had 4 phases of data collection. We collected data before the burn, during the burn, directly afterwards, and then 6 months after the event. And we were able to collect data from 150 people on the playa that's at the event itself, and then much larger numbers in our follow-up experiments. And the playa collection happened in 2 phases. So on the first day or 2 of the event, and then also on the second to last day. So in the very beginning and then right at the end. And we were interested in getting some preliminary data on people's reported self-transformation, their changes in perspective, and there are also changes in behavior. So first let me just zoom in on the results of the playa experiment, time 1 and time 2 on playa. So during this data collection phase, we collected several variables, including people's demographic information, whether or not this was their first time at the event, these people were called virgins, and the extent to which they had undergone a transformative experience. And we measured their reported transformation with this wording. We said, "We are curious about a special kind of transformative experience, an experience that changes you so profoundly that you come out of the experience radically different than you were before the experience. This transformation may have been so profound that you could not have known what the experience or change would be like before going through it." Okay, and so what I'm going to do is show you some results based on this kind of preliminary data collection. And I'll first show you just basic self-report about how much people say that they were transformed at this event. And this is going to be broken down by the time point at which the data was collected and whether people were virgins or veterans. And what you see here is that virgins experienced a significant increase in their reported transformation from time 1 to time 2. But this is not true for veterans. And these differences are all significant, suggesting that virgins experience a little bit less transformation when they first step into the event. And by the end, they feel even more transformed than people who have had experience at this event in the past. And this is also reflected in the number of reported days they were at the event. So here what I've done is plotted on the x-axis how many days people say that they've been at the event, and then on the y-axis how much they report feeling transformed. And again, what you see is a significant positive increase in people's self-reported transformation for virgins, but not for veterans. Now, of course, one potential issue with this data is the problem of self-report. So it's possible that people want to be transformed and so present themselves in that way. And so we accounted for that possibility by using a measure that implicitly gauges people's self-perspective and other perspectives. So it's a way of kind of implicitly tapping into the extent to which they were transformed in a potentially prosocial manner. In this task, participants are instructed to draw or trace the capital letter E on their foreheads. And past research has suggested that this is a way of kind of capturing the extent to which people are focused on themselves versus focused on the other. If they draw a capital E that's legible from their own perspective, it's more self-focused. And if they draw a capital E that's more legible from the other person's perspective, it's more other-focused. And we expected that this sort of kind of self-perspective might change from time 1 to time 2 if people are indeed undergoing a type of prosocial transformation. So what I'm going to show you here is the effect of time on other perspective. And again, we see this similar pattern that virgins are significantly changed from time 1 to time 2, but if anything, there's a decrease for veterans, although that difference is not significant. So here are the simple effects between all the bars, and what you see essentially is a significant increase among the blue bars for virgins, and if anything, a decrease for veterans, although that difference is not significant. Now, of course, we wanted to see far above explicit measures, even implicit measures. We want to see if these changes are going to be reflected in participants' actual behavior. And so to do this, we asked people to play the dictator game. In this game, people are given 6 tickets. And the way that we conducted this experiment at the event was that we gave people 6 tickets, and then we told them that each ticket was going to be reimbursable for 1 prize from the mystery box. And the mystery box consisted of trinkets that are kind of essential ingredients to Burning Man people, like earplugs and lip balm, bracelets, these kinds of things. They are very valuable on the planet. And participants' task was to decide how many tickets they wanted to give away and how many they wanted to keep for themselves. And so here we have the results from the dictator game. On the y-axis, we've coded whether people gave away all or none of their tickets. So we had to do this because the simple effects of simply the means of giving away versus how many people gave away and versus didn't was not significant. But when we code it this way, we get preliminary evidence of a pattern that we suggest and hope to follow up this coming year. But so what you see on the y-axis is whether people donated everything or not. We coded it binarily like that. And again, you see this increase for virgins. People are significantly more generous at time 2 than time 1, but no significant difference for veterans. And this this difference was significant. Okay, so now another important question, far above just the local effects of being at the event itself, we want to investigate whether this is a lasting change. And so for this, we can zoom out and look at people's responses to these survey questions that we asked them in follow-up surveys after Burning Man itself. And so here, I'm going to show you some data from our follow-up survey, which we conducted just this month. That's 6 months after the Burning Man took place last year. And what we asked people was, are these changes still persisting? We asked them whether they've undergone a transformative experience, and then whether these changes are still, to the extent to which these changes are still persisting. And what you see is that about half of people said these changes were persisting either very much or quite a lot. So that's the lightest 2 bars at the top here. And then over 3/4 said that they were at least somewhat still persisting. So this is preliminary evidence that people really feel these changes are lasting and meaningful in their lives, even after they leave the event and go home to their everyday normal lives. And as a final hint that people experience lasting change at Burning Man, we can zoom out and look at all the data together. And one question we asked across the board is a measure of people's attitudes towards others. So the question is, I assume that people have only the best intentions. So this is a very fundamental measure of people's prosocial attitudes towards others, and it seems to have it's been shown to have a robust predictive validity in predicting people's behavior on things like trust games. Okay, and so here on the y-axis, I'm plotting people's responses on this measure, and it's broken down by the time of data collection, before the burn, at the event itself, and then the census took place within about a week of the event, and then the follow-up was about 6 months later. And so what you can see is this kind of significant upward trend for people that have never been first-timers. no upward trend for veterans. And what the important thing that we wanted to see was whether there was something that distinguished people who had been to Burning Man before from those who had not. And so what we did is conducted planned contrasts between pre-burn virgins, that's this bar right here, this single bar, and everyone else in the sample. And as we expected, the difference among these groups was not significant. Anyone who had actually been to the event. But the main difference, the statistically significant difference, was when you contrasted that with people in this pre-burn condition. And so what this suggests to us is that there's a kind of a lasting change that occurs in people's attitudes towards others before and after the event. So overall, what I think emerges from this data is this really interesting pattern suggesting that people are profoundly changed at Burning Man. And this takes place on a variety of measures, including self-report, implicit measures, and behavioral ones. And even more interestingly, these changes seem to persist long after the event, so that even 6 months later, people who are virgins now look indistinguishable from veterans. And I should also point out that if you're wondering, all of these effects are still significant when you control for drug use. You might be thinking, okay, I don't know what you're doing that. In fact, actually, when we adjust or control for drug use, they're all just as significant as they were. So that's an important qualifier. Okay. So of course, what we haven't addressed yet is the processes that underlie this kind of transformation. And so that's what we're trying to address in part 2. In this part, we intend to test the idea that epistemic and behavioral transformations can lead to more prosocial behavior by changing people's action and outcome valuations. And so the way that we do this is adapted from research that Fiery, Fishman, and Ryan and Miller have done, and others have done, and we're really indebted to them for helping us develop this procedure. And so suppose I presented you with an act. So, for example, giving a child a teddy bear on the subway. And there's 3 dimensions you could rate this act on. You could say how pleasurable it would be for you to perform. This would be the action value of the act. You could say how beneficial it would be for others. This would be the outcome value. And you could also say how praiseworthy the act is overall. And the key prediction here is that the higher people's valuation of the action or the outcome of the act, the more sensitive they will be to these factors in judging its praiseworthiness. So to test this idea, we assembled a list of actions. For example, donating blood, installing geothermal heating in your home, asking someone to call 911, and comforting an old lady. And we asked 100 M-Turkers to rate each of these actions in one of these 3 dimensions. So we asked them either how good would it feel for you to act this out as part of a movie script, that tapped into the action value. How beneficial would this action be for others? And how morally praiseworthy this is. And we selected the 23 acts that gave us the best distribution across the 2 dimensions of action and outcome. And so what you here are the 23 items we selected. On the x-axis, you have how high the act was rated in the action value. And on the y-axis has how high it was rated in the outcome value. So for example, the teddy bear example is very high in action value because it creates these kind of warm, fuzzy feelings. You feel really good doing it. But it's not necessarily the most beneficial act. On the other hand, for example, convincing a friend, this item is convincing a friend to donate blood marrow in a hospital. Now, this might not feel so good to do, but it creates a larger benefit. And so that's kind of going to be higher in the outcome value, but not as high in the action value. And the correlation among these items is fairly low, suggesting that we have kind of a good distribution among these valuations. And when we look at how action versus outcome valuation predicts the praiseworthiness of an act, we already see interesting effects. So on the x-axis, you see for each act either how pleasurable M-Turkers think it would be to perform, or how beneficial they believe it is to others. So this is either action or outcome, depending on the color of the dot. And these are plotted against praiseworthiness. And what you see here is preliminary evidence that praiseworthiness for good deeds is more closely associated with the action valuation than it is with outcome valuation. So when people are judging how good and how praiseworthy a deed is, they're more sensitive to how good it would feel to do than they are to how beneficial it would be. And what we intend to do at Burning Man this year is present people with the same list of items and ask them how praiseworthy they are. And we'll also ask them about their gifting habits at the event and whether they underwent a transformative experience or feel more connected to others. And then we'll look at how closely people's praiseworthiness ratings for these 23 items tracks their action and outcome, those items' action and outcome evaluations. And what we expect is that transformative experiences at Burning Man will influence how sensitive people are to action and outcome value when judging moral praiseworthiness, and that this will ultimately predict their willingness to engage in prosocial behavior. So just to wrap up, I've showed you some preliminary evidence that people experience prosocial transformation at Burning Man, and this change happens on a variety of different measures, and it seems to last for several months after the event itself. And I've also suggested one mechanism by which this might occur. In other words, changing the value people place on acting out a good deed versus the benefit it brings to others. And we're looking forward to further investigating this possibility over the coming year. And another thing we hope to accomplish in the near future. Wow, I didn't expect that to be so funny, but yeah, we want to make a comparison between Burning Man and Coachella. So the main difference between Burning Man and Coachella is Coachella has a festival. It takes place in a desert. But what's missing from Coachella is maybe some of these practices of gifting and a money-free economy. And so we're interested in ascertaining with comparison to Coachella whether or not these particular ingredients that are present at Burning Man but not there at Coachella are essential for creating these kinds of prosocial transformative experiences. And we're also collecting information from an organization that facilitates the use of psychedelic drugs. So in order to see, we want to use that kind of as a control to see whether this shares some of the traits that are and qualities that are present at Burning Man itself. So overall, I think there's an enormous amount still to be learned about how people undergo prosocial transformations. As I mentioned, Burning Man is just one of many places in which these kinds of changes occur. But if we can better understand the psychological mechanisms that lead to this kind of lasting change, then I think there's a good chance that we can ultimately are going to be better able to foster it in people and to help them sustain it into the future. So thanks very much for listening.